share. All right. Can you all see? Oh, where'd it go? There it is. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
All right. Gotta get the screen thing here. Slide. Get out of the way. Sorry, hold on 1 second. Slideshow from beginning. There we go. All right. Welcome everyone to this week's. You've got the buyer now what? Hold on, I got a bunch of people coming in, so we just give it a second. Let them sign in. I just clicked on 5 different people, so we'll give it 2 seconds and then we'll get going. Let them all connect. All right, looks like they're all connected. Perfect. So I've got a buyer, now what? So this is a follow-up series to when we did this with the seller a few weeks back. And a lot of you have asked a bunch of questions about, knowing what the buyer process is if you haven't been through one. So this is going to give you a good oversight. And then, if some of the experienced agents on the call that have worked with buyers before have some insight to provide at the end of the slideshow, we'd love to hear your real life experiences with buyers and some of the unique things that may or may not have come up. So let's get right into it. So the first thing you want to do is you want to remove all assumptions of buyers. So there's a common theme out there that buyers are liars. And I don't like that because the simple fact of, I think it sets a negative tone to the relationship, and we're all about the relationship. So if you're removing the assumptions that they're liars, they're not liars, they're just uneducated on the process. So education is going to be key when working with buyers. You want to set expectations early, you want to set them often, and you really want to walk them through the process like they're an infant and don't know much. So, our situation actually just yesterday was we're looking at potentially buying a new house and kind of going through that process. And we got a pre-approval letter, and it just says you are approved to X amount because we told our mortgage broker what we wanted to potentially pay for a new property. So that's all he put down. But that did not tell us what we actually could be approved for if we wanted to go for top of our budget, for instance. So we didn't ask the right questions. So basically, we didn't really know. So if you put that into a buyer's perspective that isn't an industry professional and doesn't understand how that really works, they might not know to ask, hey, what is the top dollar? So they might only think that 250 is their top number or 300. So if you're assuming that they asked the right questions of their mortgage brokers, then that might be a bad assumption. So remove all assumptions, try to get as much information as possible. Maybe they're just comfortable paying 250. That's also something you want to know. So remove the assumptions, get all the information you possibly can on the buyers, what their goals and everything are, and then you can move forward from a positive spot, but it's much better if you have all the information. Sign the buyer broker agreement. So this is the next step, and this is an important step for a couple of different reasons. And I know I've been back and forth on this with some of you as far as why to do it, why not to do it. The main goal is this is going to protect you, especially in a market like this, from anyone that's going to, kind of waste your time. So it protects your time because if they don't sign it, they're not a serious buyer or they're not going to be loyal to you. So you shouldn't spend that much time with them. And that's just plain and simple. It gives them a sense of loyalty because they've signed something. They now have a physical contract that they feel that they are in with you. It's just one extra layer of that relationship being kind of solid and that bond being solid. So that's another reason to have them sign it. And then it also gives us the option to go after the commission from unethical brokers or sales agents. So we've all heard about those stories of my buyer went to an open house without me and the agent talked them into representing both sides and kind of writing me out of the deal. So it gives us the ability on the broker standpoint to then approach the other broker and say, hey, listen, we have this signed broker's agreement. We're owed the commission. We had the probable the cause. We brought the buyer to you. We sent them to that open house. We've been working with them. We are owed the commission. So it just works out to our advantage and gives us options of things to do. So that's why you want to get the signed buyer broker agreement. All right, prep work. So this is going to be key to not wasting your time and trying to find them the house in the quickest amount of time, and going to be able to get them to kind of whittle down their wants and their needs. So you want to identify, as we talked about a little bit earlier, you want to identify what they're looking for. Now, this goes off that whole buyers, uneducated in the process. They also don't always know exactly what they want. And also, a bigger thing is you might get a husband and wife situation. The husband might want X, Y, Z, and the wife might want A, B, C. Well, you really then have to get them both to get together and figure out what their needs are. So the needs are going to trump the wants, and then you can kind of whittle down the wants. And then sometimes when they're way off, we have strategies that can help you kind of get them together to say, hey, listen, okay, you want the world, marble tile, beautiful pool, like in the best area, but you only have a budget for something way different. Well, you can send them those properties that are in their budget for all their, or that are not in their budget for all those wants, and kind of get them to have realistic expectations. So getting a detailed overview of what they're wanting, what they're expecting, and what they're thinking is going to help you in the buying process and save you a lot of time, gas, and energy showing properties. So again, identify wants versus needs. So I would even have, Colleen talks about the T-square, put it in a T, draw it down on paper for them. On one side is wants, so it would be nice to have, but don't need. And one are needs. I absolutely can't live without this. This has to be in my house, or I don't even want to take a look at it. And then that way you can always go back to them and say, hey, listen, this was in your needs, but now you're saying it's a want. So if they ever flip flop, you kind of have it written down for them on paper. It keeps them on track because the process can be daunting for a lot of buyers. Viewing parties. This is a really good idea. If you can get to meet up with them, and instead of just sending them properties, meet up with them and have a list of 30 properties that you can take a look at on a screen and whittle down what they like, what they don't like, what they hate, what they absolutely want to see. So then hopefully you can whittle it down to about 3 to 6 properties. And then you just go see those 3 to 6 properties. They've already kind of pre-screened them saying, I really like them. They're both in agreement. And then when they got there and they get the feeling about the place and they get, all the warm fuzzies, then they'll more likely or not want to make an offer on one of those properties. So if you can do the viewing parties, that's going to save you a lot of time and energy of traveling to and from showings. After that, you want to schedule the showings once you've kind of gone through their list of wants and needs, identified a few properties, schedule the showings, and then you want to do a maximum of 6 properties in one single day. And that's a lot. If you can keep it to 4, great. Sometimes they really are still unsure of what they need. They need to see some properties, especially if it's early on, but you want to keep it to no more than 6 properties. Because they're just going to get tired. They're going to get frustrated by the end of the day if they haven't seen exactly what they want. And you're also going to be at that max kind of limit of, going around and spending that much time with them. So 6 properties is kind of that magic number. You don't want to go over that in a day. All right. So after that, you find the property, they've agreed to it. They're like, yes, this is the property I want. So now you're going to submit the offer. So what you want to make sure you have a full understanding of who's going to be on the contract. So who's going to be deeded to the property, who's going to be on the mortgage. And then you want to make sure you have all their contact information, especially names and email addresses. And the reason why is because of zip forms, and that's how we get our authent to sign and everything to go smoothly there. You also want to know how much are they willing to put down as earnest money deposit, and that's also known as the EMD. So that's that second line of the contract where they do it. Now this is different than the down payment that they're putting down for their financing. So that does not mean you need to put the entire amount of what they're like. So if they're only financing 95%, so they're putting 5% down, that does not have to go in earnest money deposit. That goes down at the cash to close. So the earnest money deposit is what are you willing to put up as collateral for the buying process of this house while you're kind of taking the look at it. They're putting their house up for collateral. What are you willing to put up as an earnest money deposit so that if you decide to back out later on after your contingency periods, which we'll talk about in a second, that's what's at stake for your buyers. So how much are they willing to do? And the higher the amount, the more the more strong your offer is. What are the primary concerns with the process? So you want to find this out from your buyers. What are they concerned about? Are they concerned about a roof leak? Are they concerned about the age of the water heater? Are they concerned about the smell of the carpets? Whatever it is, you want to know and you want to drag it out of them. So that way you can use that as leverage while you're negotiating an offer. So make sure you really have a good sound grip on what your buyers are concerned about in this house. If they're not concerned about anything, great. Then maybe you can even, like in this kind of market, that would be something where they can say, hey, I don't even care what's wrong with the house. I just want the house, great location. And I can, we can figure everything out from there. Awesome. Well, that might be able to negotiate a waiving of the inspection period. So, you really want to get a good grip on what they're thinking, what they're feeling of that house when you're going to make that offer. So how you can kind of play it. So again, how badly do they want the house? That's how aggressive you want to get. So if they really want the house, they can't live with this house. This is their dream house and they're just so overwhelmed that they really need it. Well, then you want to get aggressive and you want to make sure that if there is another offer that's being submitted, that you guys are in the hunt and they're going to come back and at least counter, if not accept your offer flat out. So you really want to gauge how badly they are. It's not all about necessarily just, getting the most amount off for that house or getting the best deal. If they really want the house, you want to make sure you're coaching them to do the very best offer and giving the strongest terms. And the strongest terms are not always the highest price. So just remember that. So that's that part of it. Set the expectations with your buyers too. So we might do these comps and, especially in a market like this, be like, oh, that house is way overpriced. There's no way that it's worth that much. Well, there's another buyer that might feel that way, or there's the seller might feel that way. And if it's early on in the process, they might not be willing to accept less than what they're asking for. So you just got to have to know what they're coming from. The best way you can do that, pick up the phone, talk to the other realtor, ask them. And sometimes they'll tell you, sometimes they'll divulge some information, sometimes they won't, but they'll at least have a kind of coded conversation with you of, yeah, the best you can do is submit an offer. We can see where it goes. There's nothing else on the table right now. And so they'll give you a little bit of clues as to where you should be going with this offer to win that bid. And I said, not all the time has that happened, but a majority of the time, if you ask the other realtor, they will kind of coach you as to where you need to be for that current offer. And just let your buyer know that most likely that if they don't go in at full price, there's going to be a counter. They're going to try to do some negotiation room. So, find out what your buyer's top dollar is of what they're willing to pay for that house. And then you can sometimes gauge the difference of, where you think they'll at least get to get a counter to get your buyer there. Because if you say the house is on for $350 and your buyer can't pay more than $330, well, obviously you don't want to go in at $330 because then the seller's going to come back with something more. So you want to kind of, give yourself some wiggle room to have some negotiation power. So definitely know the information is the key takeaway of this slide of what your buyer's situation is. All right. So you get an accepted offer. Yes, pumped up. You're ready to go. Everything's signed, sealed, and delivered. What do you do now? All right. So the first thing you should do is make sure all the deadline dates are written down. Put them on your calendar, however you can organize yourself or want to get that organized. We have a transaction management part of the Zip forms that you can kind of get into and put all your dates down there too. So it'll keep you on track. But when's the earnest money due date? There's an earnest money due date number 2. So this is for if you have a after inspection, you want to put another X amount down to kind of seal the deal. That's an option that you can always choose, but you want to make sure that those dates are written down and that your clients are following them so they stay in compliance with the contract. The inspection period. So if you choose 7 days, 10 days, 15 days, whatever it is, make sure you have that date written down because that is the date that you have to get all of your repairs and requests into the selling party so that they can then make their decisions and figure out, negotiate that second level if there's anything on the inspection report that comes back. So make sure you know that date when that ends. The appraisal date and the financing contingency period are kind of hand in hand. So the appraisal date, you want to make sure that you're staying, which we'll talk about in a couple of slides. You want to make sure that you know when the appraisal is happening so that you can be there, especially if you know that there's going to be maybe an issue with the appraisal. So on the selling side, generally that's their responsibility to then go and try to provide comps to make sure that the appraiser has all the information of what is unique about the house so that they can make the decisions and try to get it as close to your, the asking price as possible, or, whatever the financing price is. So that's what you want to make sure that you know where the appraisal date is. And also, like in this market, for instance, the appraisals are backed up. So you know that there might be a financing problem, because if the appraisal can't get in, then the closing might have to be pushed back. So you want to make sure you're staying on top of that, make sure the appraisal has been ordered, and so everything can move kind of smooth. So that's why you want that date is important. Financing contingency period for your buyers. So if you're outside of that 30 days, which is standard on the contract, then your buyer, if they were to get denied a loan at that point, would lose their earnest money deposit. So you want to make sure that the bank is on point, and especially if you're using a big bank like a Chase, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, any of those big banks, you have to make sure that your client is staying on top of that process, because that's where we usually see most of these problems come up. The 30-day window comes and goes, and then all of a sudden you're a week out from closing and they get denied a loan for whatever reason. And now if you put $5,000 down and earnest money deposit, that's gone. And there's nothing that we can do about it. And you're obviously going to have an upset buyer. So you want to make sure that those contingency periods and those dates are really firm and you're in the know. Now the financing contingency period, always check with the lender that your person's using, and ask them, is the 30-day window okay? Are you guys backed up? Do we need to put an extra 15 days in there? Because you can write in the contract, if 30 days isn't enough, you can put 40 days or 45 days. So you can extend that in your offer. So just make sure that you know the contract and you're in touch with the lender, and make sure that they're knowing. And then you go to closing. And that's why you want to put the closing date down, so that you know that that's the date that basically you're collecting your commission. So the step 2 is, now that you have all these dates written, you want to set up the inspection. You want to provide your client with 3 inspectors' names and numbers, and you want to make sure that they schedule something for a few days out, because they only have that certain window. If it's 7 days, you might want to call the inspectors for them and just say, hey, what can you do it? When can you get there? And can we get this going? And then send your client the escrow agent information. So generally in the contract, this isn't standard for 3 days. If you have an out of town buyer, I always write in 5 days, give them that extra 2 days for mailing. So if they're mailing a check and they're not providing wiring, make sure you give them that extra couple of days. But those are after the accepted offer. And so what happens when the inspection period comes and goes? So highly recommended that you go to the inspection. And the reason being is twofold. One, it shows your client that you're really cared. You're invested in their process. You're there for them, because it's an overwhelming process for a lot of them. They don't understand a lot of things. And the inspection period, if you ever read an inspection report, it can be pretty overwhelming for people, and because everything says, hire a licensed plumber to do further inspection, or so anything that they put on that inspection report always comes with the caveat of hire a licensed person to look at further into this matter, which can be kind of scary if you have that on a report 20 times. Now things are starting to add up and they're starting to spiral and freak out. So, but it also helps you when you're walking around. The inspector will go through and explain everything that they find. So they'll say, hey, this is what I found. I have to put in my report for this reason, but it's not a major concern. And that's when you can kind of ease your client's fears and say, hey, listen, remember, he said it wasn't a major concern. This is generally what it happens. And it also helps you in your future, like in your future buyers, looking through different things and being able to point out different things as you're on your process. So this is the inspection. You have three options if the inspection report comes back and work is needed. So the three options are: you can ask the seller to fix the items, you can ask for a credit for your buyer to have the items fixed, or you can walk away without any penalty. So you can, within that inspection period, your buyer can walk away from the deal for any reason. They don't have to give a reason. It doesn't have to be due to the inspection report. They could get buyer's remorse. They could have found another house. It doesn't make a difference. They can back out for any reason, during that inspection period, and their earnest money will come back to them. After that 7 days, then they don't have any recourse to collect their earnest money unless the loan process fails. So those are some things just to pay attention to. The other piece to it is the seller, it's an as-is contract. The seller does not have to accept anything. So they know that you can walk away, and not have a problem. And the seller can just say simply, no, I'm not fixing anything. If they want it, they want it as is, and the seller can definitely take that stance and not be willing to work with it. Generally, they don't do that, and they'll at least, give you some things, but not everything, or, some credit towards it or whatever. But you definitely want to make sure that you know both sides. So if your buyer's asking for the world, you can tell them the risks of asking for the world. So that's the inspection period. Next, you want to write up an addendum. So anything you do, once you agree to it with the selling side, you write it up in an addendum, and then you get everyone to sign it. So now everyone's in the know. It's clearly stated, what's going on, after the inspection period. Once that addendum signed, the inspection period's over. It's agreed to. So now your buyer is relinquishing the rest of that inspection period to be able to back out, because you've now agreed to, terms based off the inspection. All right. Also, if you have anything that did come up that you're asking for, there's two reports that you're going to get from the inspector. One is a full report of the inspection, which gives you everything, even the stuff that's passed. And then one's a copy, it's a summary report, which gives all the recommended repairs to the house. So that's the one you would send off to the selling agent. After the inspection period, it's pretty much just staying in touch with the mortgage company. As we talked about, find out when the appraisal is. If you think there might be a problem, bring your own comps. If your buyer's like, I really just want this house, and I don't care if I have to overpay for it or whatnot, and they might have some cash that they can put through, make sure that the appraisal process is, then if it's in their best interest, because that's what they want, make sure you bring some comps to support the sales price if you have some. Sometimes appraisers will use it, sometimes they won't, but that's up to the appraisal depending on what their criteria are. Also with appraisals, you want to make sure that I lost my train of thought there. Never mind. So stay in touch with title also to make sure that everything's on track. So you want to make sure title is really they're the ones that are going to close the everything out. So they make sure that they have the mortgage company's documents. They make sure they have the sales documents. They're paying out the commission. So you want to make sure that title has everything that they need to make sure that the transaction goes smooth and that they have everything that is needed to closing. I always recommend go to closing with your clients. Again, it's a one last, hurrah, it worked out. They're excited, join in their excitement. It kind of seals that bond with you moving forward. And so that way, they're always thinking about you. And so when you follow up, it's an exciting time. You're always like, hey, how's the house? And you really can get involved with them. Grab a photo for your records / social media posts. Congratulate them on their closing, and getting into their new home and into their new phase of life. And then also it's another way that you can ask for a recommendation and a good review. So some people bring closing gifts, some people bring, any number of things to closing, just to kind of make it one last special goodbye and thank you for using me as your realtor. So anyone have any, what are we doing? How are we doing for time? All right, we got 5 minutes. So does anyone have any real life experiences that they want to bring up that maybe, see who's on the call here. Lauren, I know you've got some cool, more on the sales side, but I know you've done some interesting ones. But anyone have anything that they want to share? No? Okay. Well, I've had some on the selling side. You know, there's some things that have come up. So we didn't put in the contract. This is on the seller side. We had in the contract, sorry, that a microwave was included. Now, there was this little rinky-dink microwave, college dorm style, $20. You can get it at Lowe's or Home Depot. The seller, for some reason, decided he wanted it at the last minute and took it out of the house. So the house closes, they get to, the new buyers get to the house and microwave's gone. Well, the buyer was irate and just made a whole big scene over this $20 microwave. So, that's one thing that, you want to make sure that you also are letting your buyers know what is coming in and what is not coming in with the property. Oh yeah, this is a good one from Lauren. I'll tell you in a second. She put it to everyone, but they, you get all sorts of wacky things. So the basic long and the short of it is, it doesn't matter how big or small you think something is. In someone's mind, it could be the most massive thing that they've ever done. Now, granted, these buyers were a little crazy. They also asked to do their wedding in the backyard the day before closing. So, take it for what it is. But if you see Lauren here said, they just recently had a buyer back out of a contract because they Googled the address and thought that a previous tenant was a psychic. So there you go. That was a crazy one. We've talked about that, with Lauren. It was, they had a contract. They were excited about the house. And for whatever reason, the buyer just did a little research and did some digging and just put it out there. There was never a tenant in that house that was a psychic. There's no record of it. The owners owned it for a long time and that was never a thing. So who knows if they were just making it up because they had buyer's remorse and wanted to back out or whatever. But, you see some crazy things and you kind of have to go with the flow. But the best thing you can do in those kind of situations is just remain calm, pretend like, this happens all the time. Even as crazy as it is, you can just say, this happens all the time. Crazy things come up in transactions, people emotions get away with them. And they're just gonna go nuts. So you keep it calm and you say, hey, listen, we can either figure it out and we'll work with the other agent to see what we can do about it. And there's no issues. We'll put it back on the market, and it is what it is. And we'll find something better, find something different for you. So just kind of, wading through all that. But definitely, working with buyers is a unique experience and it definitely will test your patience on a lot of levels. And sometimes, they just can't make a decision. And when that happens, you just have to kind of ask them questions, really whittle down what they're looking for and really just get really specific with your line of questioning, because otherwise they'll just make you see 1,000 properties and never buy anything. So those are some ways that you can definitely, know if they're just looky-loos and never going to actually be seriously buyers. So that's what I have for you guys today. It's 12:29. So hopefully this was beneficial to everyone. If you have any questions, let me know. And otherwise, have a great week, everyone.
Thank you. You as well. Have a great week. Take care.
Have a great day, everybody.
Rob.